Imagine for a moment that you are standing in total, suffocating darkness. The air around you is thick, heavy with the scent of mold, stale sweat, and the unmistakable metallic temps of rusted iron. But it is not just the smell that overwhelms you. It is the sound. Above your head, through the cracks in the wooden ceiling, dust and sand drift down into your hair, accompanied by a noise that vibrates through your very bones. It is a rhythmic, deafening roar. 50,000 human beings are screaming in unison, not to welcome you, but because they are desperate to witness your final moments. You are standing in the hypogeum, the subterranean labyrinth beneath the legendary Colosseum. Your heart hammers against your ribs like a trapped bird. You are not a hero. You are not a god. In the eyes of the Empire, you are something far less than human. The heavy wooden gate before you is slowly hoisted up by a system of pulleys and ropes. The blinding Mediterranean light floods into the tunnel, burning your eyes after hours in the gloom. You step onto the platform, and the machinery lifts you upward, rising from the underworld into the world of the living. The searing heat hits your face instantly. Beneath your sandals, the golden sand has been spread thick and smooth. Do you know why the sand is so deep? It is not for your comfort. The Latin word for sand is harina, from which we get the word arena. It is there to absorb the crimson pools that are about to spill, ensuring the performance is not interrupted by the slippery mess of death. Welcome to Rome. Welcome to the grandest stage and the most magnificent tomb of the ancient world. We often look back at Roman gladiators through the lens of modern entertainment, picturing muscular heroes fighting fair duels for honor and glory. But history, when stripped of its glamorous veneer, tells a different story. A story that is far crueler, more calculated, and infinitely colder than any fiction. The first truth that few will tell you is that the arena was not a place to honor courage. It was a massive political machine, fueled by fear and crowd control. In Rome, there was a cynical concept known as panem, at circenses, bread and circuses. The emperors understood a terrifying truth. A hungry crowd is a dangerous crowd. So they fed the populace free grain and gave them elaborate deaths to watch. When the eyes of the people were glued to the gladiator's blade, they forgot their poverty. They forgot the plague. And most importantly, they forgot about rebelling against the throne. You, standing on that burning sand, are not a warrior. You are a distraction. You are an instrument of political stability. But the true brutality lies not in the sword, but in ownership. Look at the men standing across from you. Most are slaves, prisoners of war, or condemned criminals. The moment you stepped into the ludus, the training school, you ceased to be a person. You became an asset, an expensive investment on a ledger. Your masters, the lanista, were not the dedicated father figures often portrayed in stories. They were ruthless businessmen. They fed you a specific high-energy diet of barley, beans, and ash to build a thick layer of subcutaneous fat. This wasn't out of concern for your health. That fat layer served a gruesome purpose. It protected your internal organs from shallow cuts, allowing the fight to last longer and look bloodier without damaging the merchandise. They hired the best doctors of the era to treat your wounds, using techniques far more advanced than what the average citizen could afford. Does that sound humane? It wasn't. They healed you only so you could return to the arena and continue earning them profit. A dead gladiator was a bad investment, a loss of capital that had to be minimized. The psychological torture began long before you entered the arena. It started in the cells of the training school. Imagine living, eating, and sleeping alongside the very men you are training to kill. There is a twisted, dark brotherhood within those walls. You share your meal with the man in the cell next to yours. You help wrap his ankles to prevent injury. You joke with him in the bathhouse to pass the time. But every time you look into his eyes, a cold realization grips your heart. You know that tomorrow, the editor of the games might pair you together. You know that to survive, you might have to drive a gladius through the chest of the only friend you have left in this world. This was the Empire's cruelest game, forcing you to sever your empathy long before you severed any flesh. And now, let us return to the moment of truth. The fight is over. You have fallen, disarmed, exhausted, your chest heaving in pain. Your opponent stands over you, his blade resting against your throat. Thousands of eyes turn to one spot, the imperial box where the emperor or the editor sits. We still cling to the myth of the thumbs up or thumbs down. We think up means life and down means death. But modern historians believe the reality was likely different and far more grim. The gesture of the pollice verso, the turned thumb, was a cold command. A thumb thrust upward or toward the chest might have symbolized a drawn sword, meaning finish him. A thumb tucked inside the fist was the sign for a sheathed weapon mercy. But whatever the gesture, the horror remains the same. Your life, your breath. Your entire existence hangs on the whimsical mood of a blood-drunk mob and the casual nod of one powerful man. If the crowd screams, "Mit," you live to fight another day. But if the thunderous chant of Eugla erupts, then the curtain falls. There is no resistance allowed in this final act. Gladiators were trained to accept death with professional dignity. No begging, no crying. You must kneel tall, lift your chin, and expose your neck to the steel. You must help your killer end you. It is the only moment of control you have ever had in this entire fabricated life. The arena was not just a graveyard for men. Its cruelty extended to the natural world in ways that stagger the mind. In the wild beast hunts, known as Venatians, the Roman Empire waged war on nature itself. Thousands of exotic animals from North Africa and the Middle East were slaughtered for mere spectacle. Lions, elephants, bears, as creatures that the average Roman had never seen, were dragged from their habitats, starved, provoked, and thrown into the grinder. Records show that during the inaugural games of the Colosseum alone, 9,000 animals were killed. The sand was soaked, so red it had to be replaced constantly throughout the day. This was not hunting. This was an extermination. The Roman Empire wanted to prove it had conquered not just humanity, but the earth itself. The extinction of the Barbary lion and the North African elephant can be traced, in part, to this insatiable hunger for death. But the cruelty of Rome was not limited to the slaughter of beasts or the clash of swords. It was engineered into the very mechanics of the games, designed to maximize psychological terror for both the combatants and the audience. Consider the plight of the retiarius. If you were assigned this class, you were stripped of the dignity of a helmet or a shield. You walked into the arena nearly naked, armed only with a weighted net and a trident. You had to rely on speed and sheer desperation. Your opponent, the Secutor, was a human tank heavily armored, carrying a massive shield and a short sword. But he had a fatal flaw engineered into his gear. His helmet was smooth and round to deflect your net, but it had only 2 tiny eye holes. He could barely see. He could barely breathe. Imagine the panic of the Secutor, trapped inside that metal coffin, gasping for air as the midday heat turned his armor into an oven, knowing that somewhere in his blind spot, a man with a trident was stalking him. Or the terror of the retiarius, knowing that one slip, one missed throw of the net, meant he had zero defense against the steel bearing down on him. The crowd didn't just want violence. They wanted to see this asymmetry, this desperate struggle between speed and brute force, exposed nerves against cold iron. Yet, even the ground beneath your feet was a lie. In the ultimate display of excess, the emperors would occasionally order the impossible. They flooded the Colosseum. Through a marvel of hydraulic engineering, the arena floor was submerged, transforming the fighting pit into a staged sea. These were the Nomachiamock naval battles. But there was nothing mock about the casualties. Thousands of condemned men were forced onto ships, told to reenact famous historical naval wars. They were not actors. They were drowning men, fighting for a breath of air as the water turned dark around them, all while the crowd cheered from the dry safety of the stone stands. It was a surreal nightmare where the boundaries of reality and theater were completely dissolved. But let us go to the very end of the day. The sun has set. The crowds have dispersed to their homes to eat their free bread. What happens to the fallen? If you died on the sand, your body was not treated with the reverence of a warrior. You were dragged through the gate of death, the Porta Libitaneria, by attendants. There, in the spoliarium, the stripping room, the final indignity awaited. Figures dressed as Charon, the ferryman of the underworld, stood waiting. They were not there to pray for your soul. They were there to ensure the show was truly over. If a body twitched, if there was even a flicker of life left, they would perform a final, cold verification to ensure death. There were no miracles allowed in the basement of the Colosseum. Your armor, that expensive investment, was stripped off to be washed and given to the next recruit. Your blood was washed into the drains that flowed into the Tiber River. And yet, there is a strange, haunting paradox to your existence here. In the eyes of Roman law, you were infamian famous. You were beneath the lowest citizen. You could not vote, you could not testify in court, and you could not be buried in consecrated ground. You were social dirt. And yet, when night fell, the elite of Rome whispered your name. Wealthy matrons paid fortunes to visit the cells of the ludus in secret. They bought vials of gladiator sweat mixed with oil, scraping it from the skin of the fighters to use as a cosmetic cream or an aphrodisiac. You were a superstar and a slave simultaneously, adored by the masses, desired by the elite, but owned like cattle. It was a confusing, intoxicating nightmare where you were worshipped as a god one moment and discarded like refuse the next. Today, as we wander through these ruins and take our photos, it is hard to hear the echoes of the past. The silence of the stone betrays the noise that once filled this space. But look closely at the architecture. The Colosseum is a monument to engineering genius, yes, but it is also a monument to the savagery that humans are capable of inflicting upon one another. It reminds us that the line between civilization and barbarism is sometimes as thin as a layer of sand. When the crowd screams for violence, when life and death become a casual pastime, humanity is lost in the noise. The next time you see these ancient ruins, do not just see the greatness of an empire. Remember the nameless individuals who stood alone in the dark, waiting for the gate to open, stepping into the blinding light for the very last time. That is the naked truth. That is the true cost of the Roman games. But the arena held secrets even darker than the death of slaves. There were moments when the very laws of nature and society were inverted, creating spectacles that shocked even the hardened Roman populace. We tend to think of the gladiator as exclusively male, a brotherhood of sweat and testosterone. But the sand also bore the weight of a far rarer and more scandalous phenomenon, the gladiatrix. Imagine the hush that falls over the crowd as the helmets are removed. These are not men, they are women. For the Roman elite, this was the ultimate taboo, a spectacle that blurred the lines between eroticism and violence. Emperors like Nero and Domitian, driven by a perverse desire for novelty, sponsored these fights. They compelled women, sometimes even those from noble families, to take up the sword. To see a woman fight was considered a sign of the empire's moral decay. A thrilling but shameful subversion of the natural order. These women did not fight for freedom. They fought for the amusement of a patriarchy that viewed them as little more than exotic curiosities. When a gladiatrix fell, the roar of the crowd was different, laced with a confusing mix of lust, shock, and horror. It was a carnival of the grotesque, proving that for the right price, Rome would sacrifice even its own social ideals for a moment of entertainment. And then there was the ultimate corruption of the games, when the emperor himself stepped onto the sand. History remembers Emperor Commodus not as a ruler, but as a delusional performer. He styled himself as Hercules reborn. But when he entered the arena, the fair fight became a sinister farce. Imagine standing in the stands, watching your supreme leader fight. You are terrified. You must cheer, but you know it is all a lie. Commodus fought with a blade of high-quality steel, sharp enough to sever a limb. His opponent's cripples, wounded soldiers, or terrified gladiators were often given weapons made of wood or lead. They were not fighting a match. They were participating in a ritual execution disguised as sport. He would slaughter ostriches and giraffes from the safety of a raised platform, decapitating them with crescent-headed arrows, then brandish the bloody heads at the senators sitting in the front row. The message was clear. This could be you. The arena, designed to distract the people, had become a theater of insanity held hostage by a madman. Yet, from this cesspool of death, something unexpected emerged. Something that, ironically, saves lives today. In the tunnels beneath the stands, waiting among the screams and the blood, was a man named Galen of Pergamon. He was not a fighter, he was a physician. In ancient Rome, dissecting human cadavers was strictly forbidden by religious law. Doctors could treat the sick, but they could never look inside the human body to see how it worked. They were blind to anatomy, except in the arena. Galen realized that a gladiator slashed open by a sword offered a unique window into the human form. He called these ghastly wounds windows into the body. While treating the fighters, he mapped the muscles, the arteries, and the nervous system. He discovered that the arteries carried blood, not air, as was previously believed. He learned how to suture tendons and set complex fractures. Every time a gladiator survived a brutal wound, it was because Galen had learned from the one who died before him. Much of Western medicine's foundation was built right there, in the blood-soaked infirmaries of the Colosseum. It is a chilling thought. Our modern understanding of how to heal the human body was purchased with the suffering of slaves 2,000 years ago. As the centuries passed, the cheers finally faded. The Colosseum fell into ruin, stripped of its marble to build palaces and churches. Earthquakes shook its walls, and weeds grew in the cracks where blood once flowed. But the story of the arena is not just ancient history, it is a mirror. It reflects the darkest corners of the human psyche, our obsession with fame, our desensitization to violence, and our willingness to turn human suffering into content for consumption. The gladiator is gone, but the audience remains. We are still watching. We are still cheering. The only thing that has changed is the size of the screen.